I'd like to cover some troubleshoot issues on the air spring. Some little minor things you could see or you could not see, hopefully do not see, but some little things to keep your eye out on and what to do if you do find them. So with the air spring, something that the customer may run into if there's a trouble with their check valve between the negative and the positive chamber is that the fork feels like it's diving out in its travel, and then they check the air and the air pressure is right where it should be, but the fork just is diving out in its travel and not returning properly. So that would be a sign that the check valve is having troubles. What you need to do for that is, of course, we got the lower here with the lower, or the fork here with the lowers off already, and we're just going to go ahead and remove the air spring. Set the uppers aside, and then with the check valve, what you're going to want to do is take your pick and gently remove that air piston O-ring, and then with a 1.5 millimeter Allen, there's 3 little set screws around the outside of the piston here. Just loosen those up. You don't need to take them all the way out, but do just loosen them up enough so that the piston can come off the top easily. So gently pull the piston off the top, and then you'll see right here a little spring sticking out, and that's your check valve. What you want to do is inspect this O-ring for any nicks or cuts on there. If there are any nicks or cuts, or possibly some debris like a hair or something, go ahead and remove that O-ring. Then check the seat that it sits into, making sure there's nothing causing any air leakage past that. If you do need to replace that O-ring, it is the same O-ring that goes onto the damper bolt and air spring bolt. Just slide that back on top there, set that aside, and then inspect the seat where the check valve sits. Make sure there's no hairs or nicks that might be causing some air leakage past the check valve, and just make sure it's nice and clean. Clean out anything that possibly could be causing the air leak past. With everything all cleaned and O-rings replaced that need to be, just set that check valve down inside the air spring rod there. Next spot you want to check is inside the air piston is an O-ring. Just visually check it before you remove it. Make sure there are no cuts or imperfections that could be causing an air leak into the negative chamber, and then use your pick and just remove that O-ring. Check the O-ring seat, make sure there are no hairs or nicks or something that could be causing an air leak past there, and replace this O-ring if need be. This O-ring comes in the air spring kit, so if you've done a few air springs, you probably have that laying around. If not, just contact me. I'll get you the right size. Install the new O-ring inside there. Make sure it's all seated properly. No twists to it. Twists can also cause some air leakage. With everything reinstalled properly, you can take the air piston and just set it down onto the air spring rod. Now hold it down nice and firm so that you can retighten all 3 of these set screws. And at first, just put light pressure on each set screw. That way you balance out the air piston and it's not sitting on there crooked. With air piston on there, just visually inspect it, make sure it's nice and straight and isn't wobbling in any way. And then bring all 3 of these set screws just lightly snug. You don't want to reef on them and cause any misshaping of this piston. Another place you want to check for any hairs is on the inside of the O-ring groove for the main piston seal. If you do find any imperfections, just replace that whole air piston there. If everything's fine there, reinstall your air piston O-ring. If you have a customer that's losing air into the lowers, or their positive chamber is getting extremely high in pressure and the fork just doesn't feel plush at all, that could be a sign that you have some air leakage past the negative piston that sits down inside the stanchion leg. First thing you want to do to inspect that is remove the snap ring, remove the top out seal head, and then remove the floating piston. And first inspect that outside O-ring to make sure there are no imperfections on the outside that could be causing any air leakage past this and down into the lowers. Then remove this air seal. Check that O-ring seat to make sure that there are no imperfections or hairs that could be causing any air leakage past that. If everything's okay, you can put this O-ring back on, or if it's the O-ring that's the issue, replace it with a new O-ring. Next place you want to check is the 2 O-rings on the ID. You'll make sure there are no debris or hairs or scratches or cuts that could be causing any leakage past these 2 O-rings. Inspect them, inspect the seat. There are 2 O-rings down inside there, so be sure to check both of them. Both of them are okay, go ahead and replace them. And then next thing to inspect would be the actual air spring rod. This is a hard ground rod and hard anodized. Just make sure there are no cuts or gouges in the rod, any premature wear. If you notice any wear on the rod itself, replace the rod or the whole air spring assembly. Then the last thing you want to inspect is the top out bumper here. So there's a black, on this model there's a black bumper. Some have 8 little orange bumpers. Others will have a nice clear bumper. It just depends on the generation of this assembly. Going forward, they're all going to have a clear bumper with a little ring on the outside. So you want to inspect this, make sure it's not folded over or damaged in any way. If it is folded over or damaged, you can replace it just by removing the bumper and getting a new one and installing it. Or these are all universal, so you could always get a whole new negative air spring assembly. Everything inspected, reinstall that piston onto the air spring rod, reinstall your top out seal head, your snap ring, and then reinstall everything into the fork. With everything reinstalled, put the lowers back on, reinflate the fork, and then just, a good measure is to let it set overnight, and then check it in the morning to make sure that you've cured any air leak issues that may be happening inside the air spring system.